you try to use other people as your measuring stick, right? And I dealt with this in Broken a little bit. The idea that when we judge ourselves against ourselves, we are not wise. I believe the scriptures say that somewhere. That we set up these trial measurements to convince ourselves we're good. And instead of like using the real measuring stick, what we do is we take the real measuring stick and we put it next to somebody else and we see how low they are on it and we make that the new measure. So we try to find the worst examples we can so that we can stand beside that and look down on it and be like, oh, I'm better than them. Let's see how good I am. And what we don't realize is that no matter where that is on the stick, that from God's perspective, we're all lying face down in the mud. And I'm like, well, I'm a millimeter less in the mud than he is, so I must be better. Oh, I'm fine, right? And then we try to use that to ignore what reality is. That's unbelief. It's the definition of unbelief. And racism in action, that is tribalism when it becomes us versus them, that's just one more version of this. And when any side of the community would encourage this kind of cultural assumption, would try to tell people that to be diverse by hating those not like them, and that can be thinking that everyone that doesn't look like them in one way is oppressing them. That's actually how it always works out. Everyone thinks they're all being oppressed, the victim mentality, rather than just rejoicing in the freedoms we do share here and allowing the diversity to exist, which would be real diversity. When that happens, right, it is all just enhancing the narcissism that's inherent in us. So, as a Christian, is there any place for this kind of thought that, this people group over there by nature is less or wrong? No, there's no room for this. All have sinned. We're all descended from Adam. Every single last one of us are brothers in the flesh of Adam. And this is not a great thing. That's why we're all dying. And in the flesh and blood of Jesus Christ, every single human being also has been purchased with the price of redemption. There is a new man. So that anybody who is joined to that new man by flesh and blood, by DNA even, right, is now of that second human race that will live forever, which has really nothing to do with the color of your skin or your hair, or your eyes, or your sex. It just has everything to do with whether or not you're in the man who already beat death. And this promise is for all nations. Go into all nations. When it says that, ethnicity, go to every ethnicity. Now, it's a totality transfer of the word. Our word ethnicity comes from that word. That word's a bigger word. It's a better word. It's all humans, all peoples. All cultures, all languages and tongues. There is nothing to stop any human being from being salvageable by Jesus. And so if you come along and start thinking that they're somehow less than you, who's not salvageable at a certain point because you're outside on your own, is the one who, well, having been forgiven much, now will not forgive a little. The parable of the unforgiving servant. Who has this massive debt forgiven, and he turns around, he won't forgive the small debt. Well, when you turn around and you're going to go ahead and say, well, this community over there, no matter how awful they are, you pick the worst one you can think of. Let's pick ISIS for a second here, right? So we turn and we look at ISIS individually here, right? We're not talking about nation defense or anything like that. We're not talking about, the good of the city, politics. We're talking about humans. So if I look at the people in ISIS and I decide that they are unforgivable and by nature, by substance, less human in some way, less worthy of forgiveness and mercy in Jesus in some way, less worthy of being my brother in the new race, the blood of the cup, the chalice that we drink together to proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again. If I were to in any way put a wall between them and that reality, then I am outside that reality too. Then I am that unforgiving manager who goes and looks at the small debt. Because ISIS blows up buildings and murders people. It's really awful. You know what? Compared to you, it's not that much worse. The only difference is what you see. We're all face down in the same mud. And if you're a little bit up out of the mud so that you're not punching people in the face every day, great, you're still in the mud. You're still in the mud. So, when it comes to ethnic relations in the United States of America, which again I would prefer to speak of it as cultural, relations, we have no place for distinguishing humans as of more value or less value than others. They are all created with the same inalienable rights.